The discussion in this foregoing unit has discussed extensively how languages with articles represent these different semantic notions like maximality, partitivity, genericity, familiarity, etc. A number of the South Asian languages, however, lack the definite article, and some may indeed lack the indefinite article as well. South Asian languages are not unusual in the slightest, as according to the World Atlas of Language Structures of survey of 473 languages, the majorities of the languages worldwide, 188 of them, do not use articles at all. Nevertheless, the semantic features that we have just discussed are to be found in all these languages and are expressed through multiple means. In this unit, we look at the empirical facts from languages like Hindi, Maghi, and Mizo to show how these semantic features are encoded in the languages of South Asia. In a large number of Indo-Aryan and Dravidian languages, such as Hindi, it is the bare nominal that receives the maximal interpretation. Non-maximal noun phrases are usually marked by some form of the numeral 1 for singulars and quantifiers like sum for plurals. So, take the example from Hindi, मैं प्रिया सिनेमा के मालिक से मिला. In this case, the only interpretation that you can get is I met the owner of Priya. That is, I met the only owner of Priya Cinema. If I want to imply that there is more than one owner, then I would use the indefinite article. So, मैं प्रिया सिनेमा के एक मालिक से मिला. And if I want to say I met all the owners, I would say मैं प्रिया सिनेमा के मालिकों से मिला. Bare nouns in Hindi are thus plus maximum. As a consequence, the example I met मैं प्रिया सिनेमा के मालिक से मिला would be a contradiction if there was more than one owner of Priya. Non-maximal noun phrases are perfectly acceptable in a context where there are more than one owner, because they just simply pick out an entity in the domain and assert its existence. The anaphoric uses of bare noun phrases in Hindi indicate that they are not only plus maximal and kind denoting terms, they are also plus familiar. If I utter a sentence like एक कुत्ता खा रहा है, then this is a novel reference. I can continue the sentence with कुत्ते की दुम नहीं थी. If, and just like as in English, so a dog was eating, I can't continue this with one dog or a dog had no tail. The same holds in Hindi. As a consequence, Hindi bare noun phrases are both plus maximal and plus familiar. Indefinite noun phrases, which are marked with the indefinite article a, are minus familiar and minus maximal. The same facts hold for Hindi plural nouns as well. Bare plurals are ambiguous between a plus max and a kind interpretation and are always plus familiar. Dayal 2004 points out that Hindi bare nominals are ambiguous between maximal and kind denoting terms. So, in a sentence like Kutta bahut sota hai, the dog can be interpreted both as a generic statement about the properties of dogs in general or a habitual statement about a particular dog salient in the discourse. Hindi ek noun phrases, however, do not ever receive a kind or generic interpretation. Ek kutta bahut sota hai can only have the interpretation that this refers to an object in the world and not to the kind. This difference between English indefinite marked noun phrases and Hindi ek noun phrases leads Dayal to suggest that ek is not an indefinite article, even as it can yield non-maximal and non-familiar readings. This divergence between the two languages is even further confirmed by the following sentences. As here the maximal Hindi noun phrase can outscope negation and the ek phrase can do so too. मैंने भूत को नहीं देखा. This means there is a unique ghost and I didn't see it. I can also say मैंने एक भूत को नहीं देखा, which means there are ghosts and I didn't see one. Hindi also, in a manner very similar to Turkish, marks specificity. This is called the domain of differential object marking by the accusative marker ko in Hindi. The facts are as follows. While human and animate reference in object position in Hindi must be co-marked, inanimates need not be. When they are so marked, both maximal and non-maximal phrases must have necessarily been mentioned in the preceding discourse. So let me say, in Hindi, utter a maximal denoting noun phrase, मैंने किताब खरीद ली. This means I bought the book. However, if I say मैंने किताब को खरीद लिया, this is say possible only in a context where the book kitab has already been mentioned in the preceding discourse. So you could say मैंने किताब को खरीद लिया with the understanding that we have just been talking about the book. It is not possible to utter the sentence मैंने किताब को खरीद लिया when the referent of the book is just merely familiar. Thus, in a context in which both the speaker and the hearer had decided in an earlier discourse, the speaker will buy a unique book and then proceeds to do so, only the sentence मैंने किताब खरीद ली. मैंने किताब को खरीद लिया can however only be uttered if there has been explicit and recent mention of the book in the current discourse. As a consequence, plus familiar noun phrase in Hindi can be uttered in out-of-the-blue discourse initial sentences if they are assumed by the speaker and the hearer as to be part of the shared set of beliefs or the common ground. However, specific noun phrases cannot be. Hindi differential object marking with ek phrases, that is one indefinite marked noun phrases, has the same basic specificity effect. So, मैंने एक किताब खरीद ली is non-maximal. मैंने एक किताब को खरीद लिया has the interpretation still retaining the non-maximal interpretation, but specific as well, because it would have been mentioned in the previous discourse. We now move to look at Maghi. The Eastern Indo-Aryan language Maghi is very like Hindi in all respects, with one major exception. It has these classifier phrases with ego. Ego phrases are minus familiar and minus maximal, just like the Hindi ek phrases. Maximal phrase, bare noun phrases receive a maximal interpretation and may also be kind denoting, but not familiar. And in this, Maghi departs from Hindi. In Maghi, as Alok 2012 argues, the plus familiar feature is marked by another particle, wa. He points out that this particle can be only used in situation where with the noun phrase it marks has A already been talked about, as in 6a, has already been talked about, is part of the immediate situation of the discourse, is part of the shared knowledge of people in the same physical location, or has a predictable co-occurrence based on community knowledge, and is marked and known by the information provided by the definite context. Taking a Maghi example with va, खिड़कियाँ बंद कर दे. Please close the window. अस्पतालिया में कोई सुविधा नहीं. There are no facilities in the hospital. आज एगो सभा हलो औरतियान बड़ी हला करित हलाई. Today there was a meeting, the women were making a lot of noise. Interestingly, this familiarity particle in Maghi is a morphosyntactic feature, as it triggers agreement within the noun phrase. In Maghi, adjectives show agreement for plus familiar features. For example, Lal Kitab, the red book. However, when the kitab is marked with wa, the adjective must change to lalka. So, lalka kitab wa. In fact, it seems that the presence of a plus familiar noun phrase summons up a different agreement pattern for adjectives altogether. Normally in Maghi, adjectives do not show gender and number agreement, and number agreement in fact requires reduplication of the adjectives. Black boy is Kariya Laika, and to be able to get number agreement where it's plural for boys, then you get Kariya Laika. However, if the noun is plus familiar marked, that is marked with va, not only is there gender agreement, there is an inflectional pattern of number marking comes to be employed for the masculine nouns. So, Karika Laikwa is black familiar boy familiar. Kariki Laikya is black familiar girl familiar. Kariya Laikya is girls familiar black plural familiar. However, for the masculine adjectives, you don't get reduplication, but you get karikan like one. It is black familiar boy familiar. Mizo from the Tibeto-Burman group of languages represents quite different patterns from what we have seen in Indo-Aryan. In Mizo, noun phrases may be bare or marked with demonstratives or the numeral 1. Bare noun phrases in this language, unlike Hindi or Maghi, are non-maximal. While the child is a bare noun, is a non-maximal interpretation. This is also confirmed by the scopal interaction of bare singulars with negation. Recall from the previous discussion that we expect such non-maximal noun phrases to be ambiguous, that have both wide scope and narrow scope reading. This is exactly what we find in Mizo. So a sentence like Pari didn't see child in the courtyard, to state the Mizo example in English, this statement can mean either the Pari saw no child in the courtyard, or there's a child in the courtyard that Pari didn't see. Singular noun phrases in Mizo, which are marked by the numeral 1, get a specific reading, where the meaning is of a certain X variety that we noticed for the English examples. An example like, I saw a certain lady at the market, the school and on the road, necessarily means that there is a speaker having seen the same woman at 3 different locations: the market, the school and on the road. This reading is not available to bare singular noun phrases. The presence of the numeral 1 then gives us a different reading from a bare singular. Quite obviously then, noun phrases which are marked by 1 can never signal kind denoting NPs. That is, they cannot exhibit NP level genericity. They also cannot appear in generic context at all, either with kind level or individual level predicates. Genericity in Mizo is, however, not expressed through bare nominals alone. Rather, generic interpretations may also be pressed into service. Two of the singular demonstratives that we have seen earlier are also pressed into service for sentence level genericity. That is, for use with kind level and individual level predicates. These are the proximal and the invisible singular determiners. In all contexts that generate kind or generic readings for singular nouns, such as habitual aspects and the choice of particular predicates, only these two demonstratives can be used. For plural nouns, however, plural demonstratives induce generic interpretations. Zwali's account suggests that the feature maximality is irrelevant for the description of meso and that only the feature specificity is. She suggests that noun phrase interpretation is determined in meso on the axis of familiarity and specificity, as the use of any demonstrative induces a plus familiar interpretation on the noun phrase. All the demonstratives retain the dictate contrast. Another form that occurs in meso, whose description we are not fully confident of, is the familiar, what she calls the specific definite construction, which I shall call the familiar specific construction. This construction involves sandwiching the head noun between two forms of the demonstrative. So, she refers to the first demonstrative as a deep row and the second as the demonstrative. Deep rows have different morphological forms from demonstratives. As in the deep row use, the vowel of the demonstrative is lengthened and its tone is changed to a high level tone. All demonstratives can participate with this construction. So in a context like do not pluck those flowers, the noun would be sandwiched between two occurrences of what is the same demonstrative with morphological, phonological variation, divergence, with the first deep row use involving a long vowel and a high level tone. It would suggest work by Changte 1989, however, raises some questions that need to be handled before we settle on the description. Changte suggests that these sentences, which have the form "give me the knife this," involve a deictic pronominal in the first instance and a demonstrative on the other. So, do not pluck those flowers there and give me this knife here. Suggests an analysis in which of deep rows as simple depronominal demonstratives that agree in deictic degree with the demonstrative. If Changte were right, then these constructions would be irrelevant to the maximality and familiarity distinctions altogether. Happily, however, pronominal demonstrative forms of the language are reduplicated demonstratives, and they differ significantly from the deep rows. So, it would appear that Zwali is right in distinguishing deep rows as distinct forms. From what can be made out from her description, it appears that in the double determiner question, the sandwich construction, noun phrases are marked as referentially and anchored to an item already mentioned in the discourse. The deep row demonstrative construction shows up in all contexts, irrespective of what type of predicate is used. If Zwali's observations are on the right track, then generic and specific interpretations are not mutually exclusive, and neither are specific and familiar ones, because specificity encodes a fine-grained referential structure of the items used in the discourse. To sum up, plus familiar interpretations in meso are to be traced to the presence of a demonstrative, plus specific interpretations to the presence of a deep row and the numeral 1, and generic interpretations to the selection of a particular demonstratives or the choice of kind denoting nominals. In general, then, demonstrative elements play a big role in determining the range of interpretive properties of noun phrases.